There are people who don't just live life, they absorb it. Every glance, every silence, every word spoken in passing sinks deep into them like ink spreading through paper. They don't just walk through the world moves through them. The music, the voices, the energy of a crowded room. It all leaves a mark. Have you ever felt that way? Like your heart doesn't have a filter, like everything. Joy, pain, beauty, loss, all of it hits you in full color, all at once. Have you ever cared so deeply that it hurts? You see someone's eyes, and you already know they're not okay, even when they say they are. You hear someone laugh, and you can feel the sadness hiding underneath it. You look at the sky, and even that can make you cry, not because you're sad, but because it's just too much beauty for one soul to hold. You tell yourself it's a blessing, and some days it is. Other days, it feels like a storm you can't turn off. Like your heart keeps picking up frequencies the world doesn't even realize it's sending. If that sounds like you, stay. This isn't about fixing you. This is your story. The psychology of people who feel too much. To feel too much is to live life with the volume turned all the way up. It's a mind that notices everything and a heart that refuses to forget. Psychologists call it emotional intensity, the heightened ability to perceive and experience emotion on a deeper level. It's not drama, and it's not fragility. It's empathy woven into your wiring. Your nervous system reacts stronger, your mirror neurons fire faster. You don't just see pain, you feel it as if it's your own. You can sense the shift in someone's tone before their words change. You can walk into a room and instantly feel the mood before anyone speaks. You notice when your friend's "I'm fine" sounds half a note lower than usual. You carry other people's sadness home like invisible luggage, quiet, heavy, and no one else can see it. It's a gift because you connect where others overlook. You love deeply, care freely, listen fully. You can find poetry in the smallest things, the way sunlight hits a dusty window, or how someone laughs with their whole body when they're truly happy. You don't just exist in the world, you feel it breathing. But it's also a burden because that same sensitivity that lets you love deeply also means you hurt deeply. When others move on, you still replay the words, the moments, the energy left behind. Even silence can feel loud. Even beauty can ache. People say, "You're too sensitive," as if it's a flaw, but it isn't. It's perception turned to full volume, awareness without an off switch. You see more, feel more, remember more. And while the world may never understand that kind of depth, it's what makes you human in the truest, rawest sense. It doesn't start in adulthood. This depth, this sensitivity, begins quietly in childhood. Long before you knew what the word empathy meant, you were already feeling everything too deeply. You were the child who cried when others cried, who stayed awake at night thinking about the argument your parents had, who apologized even when it wasn't your fault, just to make peace return to the room. But not every home knows how to hold a sensitive heart. When you felt too much, someone said, "Stop crying." When you asked too many questions, someone sighed, "You think too much." When you showed your heart, someone called you too emotional. So you learned quietly and instinctively to tuck those feelings away, to shrink your softness so it wouldn't make anyone else uncomfortable. Psychologists call it an emotionally invalidating environment. It's when a child's emotional world is met not with understanding, but with dismissal. And that does something profound to the mind. It rewires it for survival. You learn to scan every expression, every silence, to sense danger or disappointment before it happens. It's a kind of attachment sensitivity. You read others like maps because no one ever read you. A child who feels everything in a home that doesn't know how to listen starts to adapt. When sadness gets ignored, they turn it into laughter. When anger gets punished, they turn it into quiet. When fear gets dismissed, they turn it into self-control. And little by little, they begin to disappear behind a version of themselves that feels safer. They didn't learn to understand emotions because someone taught them. They learned because no one else did. And now, even as adults, that same child still lives within them, still listening too closely, still feeling too deeply, still trying to make sure everyone else is okay before they ever ask if they are. The brain of a deep feeler doesn't just experience the world, it absorbs it. Science tells us that people who feel deeply often have a more active amygdala, the emotional center of the brain. It's the part that lights up when you sense danger, when you feel love, when you experience beauty or heartbreak. For most people, the amygdala flickers on and off like a lamp that responds to specific moments. But for highly sensitive individuals, that lamp doesn't just flicker, it glows constantly. They don't only react to their own emotions, they absorb the emotions of others as if they were their own. Then there are the mirror neurons, the empathy circuits that allow us to feel what others feel. When someone laughs, you smile. When someone cries, you ache. For a deep feeler, those circuits are stronger, more reactive. Their brain doesn't just witness emotion, it mirrors it perfectly. That's why they can walk into a room and sense sadness without a word being spoken. Their body literally translates another person's pain into their own physical and emotional experience. Their brain isn't a shield, it's a sponge. It doesn't block the world out, it soaks it in. Every sound, every tone, every shift in the air carries meaning. And while that sensitivity can be overwhelming, it's also what makes them some of the most compassionate, perceptive people you'll ever meet. They don't just hear your words, they feel their weight. They don't just see your expression, they understand the story behind it. Their empathy isn't an act, it's their biology. It's not weakness, it's not fragility. It's the human nervous system in its most beautiful, unfiltered form. Proof that feeling deeply isn't a flaw of the mind, but a masterpiece of its design. There's a moment when feeling too much turns into feeling everything all at once. Psychologists call it emotional flooding, the mind's version of drowning. Too many emotions, too fast, too deep. For the deep feeler, it doesn't take much. A harsh tone, a disappointed look, a sad song playing at the wrong time, and suddenly, it's like the whole world is pressing against their chest. They replay every word after an argument, trying to decode what they did wrong, what they could have said differently. They walk away from conversations carrying not just their own emotions, but everyone else's too. The frustration, the tension, the unspoken words hanging in the air. They cry at songs no one else notices. They stare at sunsets and feel their throat tighten because somehow beauty hurts too. And then comes the fatigue, the kind that seeps into your bones. Because being that open, that emotionally awake, is exhausting. The brain never rests when the heart is always alert. Crowds feel heavier, noise feels sharper, even happiness can feel like too much light all at once. They don't mean to take things personally. Their nervous system just doesn't know how not to. Every sigh, every silence, every tone carries a story, and they hear all of them, all the time. That's what emotional overload feels like. Not weakness, not drama, but a storm that doesn't ask permission before it begins. It's waking up tired after a day of smiling. It's holding yourself together so tightly that the smallest thing, a kind word, a song lyric, a memory, makes the tears slip through the cracks. But there's nothing wrong with them. Their depth is not a flaw to fix. It's a heart that feels more than most people dare to. And yes, it can be heavy. But that sensitivity is also where their greatest humanity lives. When you feel everything too deeply, your heart learns to build quiet forms of armor. Not out of coldness, but out of survival. Deep feelers often find subtle ways to protect themselves from the weight of their own emotions. Little coping mechanisms that allow them to keep breathing in a world that never stops feeling loud. Some become masters of emotional detachment. Not because they've stopped caring, but because caring hurts too much. They pull back when the world gets heavy. They nod, They smile, they seem calm, but inside, they're just trying to keep from being swept away by the current. Their silence isn't distance, it's defense. It's how they steady the flood before it drowns them. Others use humor, laughter as a form of healing, jokes as a form of camouflage. They'll make everyone else laugh, even when they're the one who needs it most. Because if they can make others smile, maybe the room won't notice how much they're breaking inside. It's easier to carry pain when it's hidden behind something light. Then there are those who overthink, trying to make sense of feelings too big for logic. They analyze every detail, the conversation, the silence after, the look that lingered too long, as if dissecting it could make the emotion smaller, more manageable. But all it does is tangle them deeper in their own empathy. And when the noise of it all becomes too much, they disappear. Not forever, just long enough to breathe again. They turn off their phone, stay home, retreat into quiet corners of the world where they can finally hear their own thoughts. They don't go quiet because they don't care. They go quiet because they care too much. Because sometimes, silence is the only space big enough to hold everything they feel. Psychologists say that for highly sensitive individuals, this withdrawal isn't avoidance, it's regulation. Their nervous system, overstimulated by emotion and empathy, needs solitude the way others need sleep. It's not weakness, it's self-preservation. So when they laugh too much, analyze too deeply, or go too quiet, understand that's not indifference. That's what survival looks like when your heart is tuned to every frequency the world gives off. The world doesn't always know what to do with people who feel deeply. It praises logic, composure, and control, but flinches at raw emotion. So when a deep feeler shows their heart, the world often calls it too much, too dramatic, too emotional, too sensitive. And after hearing it enough times, they start to believe it. They learn to apologize for their tears, even when those tears are the most honest thing in the room. They laugh off the moments when their voice trembles. They swallow their words halfway through a sentence because someone rolls their eyes. And eventually, they call themselves too much before anyone else does, just to take away the sting. But that's not truth, it's conditioning. From a young age, society teaches us that emotion is something to manage, not something to feel. That strength means staying calm. That control means being uncheckable. That to cry is to lose. So we learn to suppress, to compress, to turn emotion into something quieter, more acceptable. But suppression doesn't erase feeling. It only buries it deeper. And deep feelers know that better than anyone. They aren't dramatic, they're aware. They aren't weak, they're open. And in a world that glorifies numbness, feeling everything is an act of quiet rebellion. Because feeling deeply isn't overreacting. It's being alive without armor. It's choosing to stay human in a world that keeps asking you to be half. And maybe that's the bravest thing anyone can do. But here's the part the world often forgets. There is beauty in feeling deeply. Because when the storm finally settles, what remains is something extraordinary. People who feel deeply don't just experience life, they illuminate it. They're the ones who notice the details others overlook, who find meaning in the smallest things, who can turn pain into something breathtaking. Their hearts may bruise easily, but they also love endlessly. And from that sensitivity grows something rare: creativity, intuition, compassion. Deep feelers make art out of emotion. They write the poems that make people cry, paint the skies the way they wish the world could feel, compose the songs that sound like healing. Their creativity isn't born from comfort, it's born from their courage to sit inside discomfort until it transforms into beauty. They have intuition that borders on magic. They can walk into a room and know who needs comfort before a word is spoken. They read the space between people, the silences, the things that never get said. It's not guessing, it's emotional intelligence in its purest form. And compassion, that's their second nature. They know what it's like to hurt without saying it out loud, so they never let others feel unseen. They listen without judgment, love without calculation, and give without needing to be noticed. Their relationships may be fewer, but they are real, built on depth, vulnerability, and truth. People who feel deeply are often the ones who bring light where others only see darkness. Because they've been in the dark, and they remember what it felt like to find a flicker of hope. Their sensitivity is not just a way of feeling, it's a way of healing. And in that healing, they remind the rest of us what it means to be human. The storm inside begins to fade and the colors turn warm. The world feels softer, safer, like sunrise after a long night. This isn't just about pain anymore. It's about what grows after it: compassion, art, kindness, and quiet strength. The kind of beauty that only exists in those who dared to feel it all. Healing for people who feel too much doesn't mean learning to feel less. It means learning to feel safely. Because emotions aren't enemies. They're signals, reminders that you're still alive, still human. They're meant to move through you, not stay trapped inside you. And the journey of a deep feeler isn't about silencing their sensitivity. It's about learning how to hold it with gentleness instead of fear. Psychologists call it emotional regulation, the ability to notice what you feel without being consumed by it. It's pausing before reacting. It's taking a slow breath before you spiral. It's recognizing this sadness is here, but it doesn't define me. It's whispering to yourself, I can sit with this and still be okay. For some, it begins with journaling, not to fix the feeling, but to give it a home outside the body. The page becomes a mirror for emotions that never got permission to exist. For others, it's in the small, quiet acts. Taking a walk, breathing deeper, turning off the noise for just a few minutes. Sometimes, healing means saying no without guilt. It means realizing that boundaries aren't rejection, they're self-respect. And above all, it means self-compassion. For the times you felt too much, for the moments you couldn't hold it all together, for the tears that came without warning, and for the silence that followed. You don't need to be ashamed of your depth. You just need to learn how to swim in it, not drown beneath it. Emotional balance isn't the absence of feeling. It's the art of staying kind to yourself in the middle of it all. It's sitting in the storm and saying, I can't control the rain, but I can choose not to run from it. Because sensitivity isn't something to outgrow. It's something to grow with. And once you learn to hold your feelings with love instead of fear, they stop being chaos, they become clarity. Here's the quiet truth most people miss. The most sensitive souls are often the strongest ones. Because it takes enormous courage to keep your heart open in a world that keeps breaking it. To still love after betrayal. To still trust after heartbreak. To still hope after disappointment. That's not weakness, that's resilience in its purest form. Deep feelers don't just survive the storm. They feel it completely and still find a way to stand again. They bend, but they do not break. They shatter quietly, heal slowly, and somehow return softer, not colder. Every scar becomes a map of endurance, proof that tenderness can live even after the world has tested it again and again. It's easy to be strong when you feel nothing. It's far harder to keep loving when you felt everything. That's the paradox of the sensitive. Their softness is their strength. They carry pain without letting it turn them bitter, and that takes a kind of bravery that few ever notice. So, when someone calls them too emotional, they're missing the truth. That emotion is what allows them to endure, to rebuild, to love again with the same heart that's been broken before. Sensitivity isn't fragility, it's the strength to stay kind in a world that rewards indifference. And maybe that's what true power looks like, to feel deeply, to hurt deeply, and still to choose love every single time. In time, something changes. The deep feeler begins to find balance, not by becoming harder, but by becoming gentler with themselves. They realize that healing isn't about building walls. It's about learning how to stay open without losing themselves. They learn to listen without absorbing, to love without disappearing, to care deeply without carrying everything home. They start to understand that they can hold space for others without emptying themselves in the process. It doesn't come as a sudden revelation. It comes quietly, in the way they pause before reacting, in the way they breathe before answering, in the way they let silence exist without filling it. Through heartbreak, they learn boundaries. Through exhaustion, they learn rest. Through loneliness, they learn connection with themselves. They stop trying to be everything for everyone and start becoming enough for themselves. They stop chasing perfection and begin choosing peace. Some days that peace looks like stillness, like taking a walk, like letting a single tear fall without shame. Other days, it's saying no, turning off their phone, and realizing the world will keep spinning while they rest. They begin to see that their sensitivity and their strength were never opposites. They were always meant to live together. They let the world in, but not all the way. They open their hearts, but they also protect their rhythm. They forgive, but they no longer forget themselves in the process. This is the gentle integration, not an ending, but a soft return to balance. The music rises here, warm and tender, like sunlight after rain. You can almost see the color shift, pastel light, calm, safety. It's not about being unbreakable anymore. It's about being whole. About realizing you don't need to stop feeling to find peace. You just need to stop fearing what you feel. This is where the heart finally exhales. There's a quiet beauty in reaching this point, not because everything is fixed, but because something inside finally rests. You begin to understand that feeling deeply was never your flaw. It's your fingerprint. It's what makes you different in a world that keeps trying to flatten emotion into efficiency. You realize that your tears, your empathy, your trembling heart, they are not weaknesses to hide, but signs that you are still beautifully human. In a world that tells you to toughen up, your softness is an act of rebellion. While others rush to numb, you still pause to feel, to listen, to care. You notice the rain, the silence, the way light bends through a window. You still cry at beauty, still ache for kindness, still believe that love matters, even after all the reasons not to. That's not fragility. That's strength in its most sacred form. So don't apologize for your heart. Don't shrink it to fit into spaces that reward indifference. You are not too much. You are precisely what the world forgets it needs. Someone who feels, someone who notices, someone who cares. In a world that numbs, your sensitivity is your superpower. Let the music fade now, soft and slow, like the final breath of daylight. Let silence fill the space where words used to be. Because you don't need to prove anything, not anymore. You've already felt it, and that all by itself is enough.